Hi, my name's Dom and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk a little bit more about The Blacktongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman. This is one of 2021's most anticipated fantasy releases, and this is going to be a non-spoiler review. So if you'd like to hear more about my thoughts on the book without learning too much about the contents, stick around. So let's start with the book itself. This is Christopher Buehlman's first fantasy release. He's a published horror author, but this is his first foray into fantasy. Books released on the 25th of May, both in the UK and in the US, so you can pre-order today and hopefully get your hands on a copy on the day of release or thereabouts. So this is a story told in the first person. It's narrated by the thief Kinch Nashanak. Kinch is a member of the Takers Guild. He's built up quite a debt to the guild, essentially tuition fees for his education in the underground art. So to pay off some of that debt, Kinch takes on a job for the guild following the warrior woman Galva. He doesn't know what the job itself is. All he knows is he's got to go with her on a quest that she's taking, but he doesn't have a choice in the matter. For her side of it, Galva is looking for her lost queen. The Queen's city was overtaken by giants, and when that happened, the Queen went underground. Galva is trying to find her and restore her to the throne. So the story follows the journey of Kinch and Galva as they go to Harava, which is the capital of Alstrim, the Queen's kingdom, which is now overrun by giants. The journey takes in various monsters, so we see golems, goblins, a kraken, and of course at the end of the destination they know that they're probably going to be seeing giants as well. And of course, as they travel together, we get to see the relationship between the companions grow as they learn to trust each other as well. So before we get into the details, let's have a look at the cover of the book, which is one that I personally really like. We see an actual scene from the book. So this is Kinch following Galva as they approach a witch's tower. And then behind them we've also got Bully Boy, who is a blind cat that Kinch takes on as kind of a different kind of animal companion. Now, I really like the blacks and the whites merging into all the different shades of grey and then really set off by that striking yellow colour. I think it really stands out and it's going to look great on the shelf, so I can't wait to get a physical copy of this to go with my collection. So what's inside the book itself then? As I've already said, this is told in a first-person narrative. It's one that I don't particularly like myself. I have read a few where this is done really well, and The Blacktongue Thief is definitely amongst that group. Kinch has a sort of cheeky personality that makes the book really easy to read. It's really kind of witty and free-flowing. He's cynical and he's pessimistic, but without being whiny and irritating with it, so I think that's a really good blend there. His narrative adds a really good dose of humour and there's plenty of new vulgarisms to go along with it as well. So the good thing about the narrative is that Kinch explains things as they come up. So when he first uses one of these new terms, for instance, he'll explain it to you and he'll translate what some of the other characters are saying in a different language. So it's really like he's telling the story to someone who doesn't know, which of course as the reader you don't know. And I think this brings it up in a really neat and concise way. He does this with world building as well, so he drops in little bite-sized chunks of information, so you get to see the world itself and some of the history without big paragraphs of text which would really bog down the reading. So that's really well done, I think, and one of my favourite parts of the book is the way that that's handled. So to touch on the history of the world briefly, there's recently been a number of goblin wars. I think there's two goblin wars and then a third one which was called the Daughters' War, which is where all the men had previously gone off to war and largely died. So in this third war, it's the women who are left and they went off to war instead. Horses have also been all but wiped out by some sort of virus, so throughout the world we're seeing most of the travel done by foot or by boat. As these wars are quite recent, we're still seeing a lot of the consequences. So we see people who've been to the war and survived are often scarred, so they'll be missing fingers because the goblins are known as biters. That's what they like to do, is bite off fingers of the humans they're fighting. or you'll see them with scars on their faces, for instance, where the goblins have been trying to take a chunk out of them as they're fighting there. Magic is another big part of world building for any fantasy novel. In the Blacktongue Thief, we see 3 or 4 different ways of this being approached actually. It's not overbearing, there's just different methods, and I think it works really well rather than being too much attempted. So we see the normal kind of almost traditional artifacts like rings and spell books, for instance. We see witches and wizards using spells or using potions and creating golems and things like that. So the other main one, and my favourite kind of part of the magic of this book, is like an ink magic. Various people have tattoos. Kinch has a couple of tattoos courtesy of the Takers Guild, and you see other people in the world who have tattoos that give them various magical abilities as well when they invoke the magic of that particular tattoo. Now, I'm not going to go into detail as to what those powers might be and what we see in the book, because obviously this is a non-spoiler review, but there's a tattoo that gives the power to carry another living being kind of inside yourself. I think this is really interesting. It gives us a few opportunities, and there's a couple of instances in the book where those opportunities are explored. So I think that's really well done, and will hopefully continue as the books progress through this series. So on to the characters then, and I've already spoken in a roundabout way about Kinch. I think he's a really likeable character though. He's got a really good sense of humour that I think is quite a match to mine, so I guess it was always likely that we were going to get on with each other. Galva's kind of quiet. She's almost a polar opposite really to how Kinch is portrayed. I guess part of this is because you see the story from Kinch's perspective. So while she starts off almost quite frosty towards him, we don't really get to learn much about her other than his opinion of her. As she starts to open up though, we start to see a few more depths, a few more layers being peeled away from her. Galva is a warrior woman. She's very soul-minded. She's got this single purpose of her quest, but she's also intelligent enough to know that sometimes you can't just go from A to B and you have to deviate in order to get the main job done. And I guess part of that is why she tolerates Kinch. She knows the value that he can give on the journey as opposed to necessarily the actual final destination of her quest. So there's a bit of a language barrier as well because Galva is from another country. Kinch understands her far more than she understands him. Kinch is quite good with languages, both written and spoken. And as I said earlier, he does translate for Galva so that she understands things a little bit better as well. She doesn't always pick up on the nuances of speech as her companions are talking to her, so she kind of reminds me a bit of Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy in that respect. She always takes things literally, and things will go over her head because she's just taken them at face value. So we've then got a couple of other characters who join our group as well, starting with Noregal, who is a young witch. Her story, or her character, I think gets more interesting as the story goes on. I really liked actually how her story panned out. I thought that was quite interesting and quite a good way of kind of weaving her character into the overarching plot. And then we've got a warrior called Melk, who is he's someone who has been to the Goblin Wars, so he's one of those who does kind of look down on Kinch because Kinch didn't go to the Goblin War. He went to the Takers Guild instead. Kinch and Melk actually kind of grew up together as well. They're from the same town, so there's a bit of history there and a bit of animosity from that shared kind of childhood as well. I think he's quite an interesting character for the dynamics that you get, especially with that history with Kinch. But unfortunately, he joins the group kind of quite late on in the story, so we don't really get too much time to get to know him properly and see how things pan out and how their prior relationship impacts the dynamic as the story goes on. Now, overall, I really enjoyed The Blacktongue Thief. The plot was quite standard really, there wasn't too much that was new in there, but I think the witty narrative and the relationship between the characters really helped to move the plot on. And then there's a very definite pathway at the end as well to book 2, so I'll be looking forward to finding out how the story progresses when that does come out. Now there are a couple of bits in the kind of middle third of the book which I didn't quite click with. I thought they served a point in the story, they served a purpose, but I just felt that they slowed the book down a little bit, so I didn't quite get on with them as much as I did with the rest of the book. For the rest of it though, I've got very, very few complaints. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and this book was a solid 4.5 stars out of 5 for me. So I don't think it's your typical thief story. It's more just a adventure quest story that just happens to have a thief as the main character. If you like your fantasy to come with a healthy dollop of dark humour, I think this is definitely a good book for you to try out. So that's a Blacktongue Thief in a bit of a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed this brief review of the book, and I hope you get the chance to check it out for yourself when it's released at the end of May. Now, as this is my first full video on the channel, please let me know what you think. If you've got any specific comments on the review or the presentation of the review, drop them down in the comments below. You know how YouTube works, so if you appreciate this video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more content from me in the future. So I hope to see you here again, but for now, goodbye and take care.